So you want to travel Australia for 2 weeks and see the key highlights such as Sydney, Great Barrier Reef, meet kangaroos and koalas, and hit some of the remote spots. This video covers a sample 2 weeks Australia travel itinerary. You'll hear about the best timing, neat places to visit, and how to get around this huge continent. Ready? Let's get into it. So first up, here's a quick overview on this 2 weeks Australia travel itinerary we will discuss in more detail very soon. So you arrive at Sydney and stay 3 nights. Then you take a domestic flight to Cairns and continue to Port Douglas, another 3 nights. Back to Cairns Airport and take a flight to Adelaide and to Kangaroo Island. Stay 3 nights. After that, flight back to Adelaide and travel the Great Ocean Road for 3 nights in Mount Gambier, Port Fairy and Apollo Bay. Complete your trip along the coast in Melbourne for 1 more night. Now a quick word on timing for traveling Australia. The climate and the travel seasons between parts of Australia are so different from each other, so timing your Australian trip is a key consideration. The northern parts of Australia have their rainy and cyclone season between December and March. These are not good times to visit those locations. Also, the outback areas such as Uluru, Ayers Rock are far too hot for these months. So for the northern and central Australian regions, the best months to travel are between April and October. However, for the southern regions of Australia, such as Adelaide, Kangaroo Island, Melbourne and Tasmania, the summer season, October to April, is the best time to visit. In fact, it's similar to New Zealand. If you find this video helpful, please hit the subscribe button below to stay in touch for more helpful travel videos to come. Another important consideration is to select the right locations. Australia is a pretty big place, so unless you have months of time on your hand, you definitely want to avoid driving long distances. So for this itinerary, you would mainly use domestic flights to cover the huge distances. That way you can spend time exploring each location in more depth. My recommendation is to have 3 to 4 nights at each key location and explore those areas. I go through the itinerary locations regarding transportation, activities and tour options very soon. Now the 3 most important Australia travel planning steps: season, timing, locations are all sorted. So that's 50% of your overall travel planning. Cool. Now let's go through the overall itinerary with more suggestions and recommendations. So this 2 weeks itinerary starts in Sydney and ends in Melbourne. The best time for this travel plan with the different Australian regions, so we have the northern regions as well as the southern regions, is either in April, May or September, October. You can travel outside these times, but please be aware of either the rainy season in the northern regions, so between December and March, or the cooler temperatures in the southern winter months between June and August. Please keep in mind that you can download this sample itinerary with a link in the description box below. Now let's get into the details. You stay in Sydney for 3 nights. Base yourself in the city centre, either in hotels or in apartments. These will be in walking distance or a short Uber ride to the ferry terminal and other key attractions. My accommodation suggestions for Sydney are the Grace Hotel, a mid-range centrally located hotel, the Langham, which is overlooking the Darling Harbour area, and for something really special, the Capella Sydney Hotel. This one is a real stunner. Once in Sydney, I recommend that you go on a walking tour, which is also a great way getting over your jet lag. On the other hand, you can take a city tour to check out places such as Bondi Beach. You can also use one of the ferries and head over to Manly Beach. See some tour suggestions in the sample itinerary I mentioned before. For your second full day in Sydney, I recommend that you go on a guided tour to the Blue Mountains. The nature is so different and the trail walks are such a refreshing change from the city vibe. If you have any questions, please put them into the comments field below and I will answer them for you. So after your 3 nights in Sydney, get a transfer to Sydney Airport and take a domestic flight to Cairns. Then use a local transport service and head further north to Port Douglas. Stay for 3 nights in Port Douglas. If you want to be more flexible, you could also use a rental car. It's only about a good hour's drive from Cairns Airport to Port Douglas. Personally, I like Port Douglas more than Cairns. It is smaller, and if you base yourself in the town centre, you can pretty much walk around everywhere. My accommodation suggestions for Port Douglas are Peninsula Boutique Hotel, Shantara Resort, both are adults only, or the Mandalay Apartments, which are great for family travelers. Check out the accommodation links in the sample itinerary for more details on all the properties. So here's maybe something interesting for you. If you catch an early flight from Sydney to Cairns, so you have a bit of time in the afternoon on your day of arrival, I highly recommend you visit the Wildlife Habitat Centre just outside Port Douglas to check out the local wildlife. They also offer transfers between the village and the centre. It's perfect for all age groups and children just love it as well as adults. So you have 2 full days in the area and you really need it. One day you need to go out to the Great Barrier Reef. I got my suggestion again in the itinerary with sail away Port Douglas. And to explore the Great Barrier Reef, you can either go snorkeling or you can also do a diving excursion, which will be with another operator, 𝗥𝗲𝗪𝗁. So for the second full day, you want to head out to the Daintree rainforest, which is located north of Port Douglas. It takes a whole day. It's well worth it. You will see crocodiles. We'll go on a nature walk into the rainforest. It's one of the oldest forests in the world, so well worth it and so different to anything else you would have seen and so different to what you were heading next to the southern region of Australia. There's so many other activities and sites you can explore in that area between Port Douglas and even going further north, but I will put links in the itinerary, sample itinerary below for you to check out, but you could easily spend another 2-3 nights in the region to explore it in more detail. So after your time in Port Douglas, take a transfer back to Cairns Airport and take a domestic flight to the next location. So flying in from Cairns to Adelaide and connect with the afternoon flight to Kangaroo Island will depend on the airline schedule. Currently only Qantas is flying scheduled into KI, Kangaroo Island, and their flights can be a bit patchy. Therefore, you may need to stay 1 night in Adelaide and continue the next morning. The flight time is only 40 minutes. Another option is to use the ferry service between 𝗥𝗲𝗹𝘁 and Peninsula, but this would take much longer, so I really recommend the flight if any possible. After arriving on Kangaroo Island, or KI as the locals call it, stay for 3 nights and explore this outstanding place. Kangaroo Island is known as the Galapagos of Australia because of its stunning scenery and wildlife. It's larger than many think, so you really want to have 3 nights here. You could easily add another 1 or 2 nights. In my job as a travel designer, some of my guests don't want to leave the place, especially with the lovely accommodation options I will mention in a minute. If you are into pristine natural environment and less touristy places, then KI is for you. Again, I'll put some links in the sample itinerary in the description box below, as well as in the downloadable travel planning sheet. My accommodation suggestions for Kangaroo Island are Ecopia Retreat Eco Villas and Ocean View Eco Retreat. Honestly, those properties are just out of this world. After Kangaroo Island, take a flight back to Adelaide, pick up a rental car and continue on the famous Great Ocean Road for the next 3 nights. Then have your last night in Melbourne. The Great Ocean Road is one of the few self-drive trips I recommend for Australia if you have a short time budget. Distances are manageable and the partly coastal road and the scenery is just stunning. You'll stop along Mount Gambier, Port Fairy and Apollo Bay. You may want to check out little places like Rope, the wine areas around Coonawarra, the Grampians National Park, and of course the 12 Apostles, and some cool activities around Apollo Bay. From Melbourne you could either depart with your international flight, take a flight back to Sydney, or even add New Zealand to your itinerary and extend your trip. I've done another video on that sample itinerary, Australia and New Zealand, so check out the description box below. On the other hand, if you're into hiking, then Tasmania might be a good option for you to consider. But remember, always keep in mind the various seasons and weather conditions if you want to visit those places. Check out my other travel videos on Australia in the playlist up here, which also includes a sample itinerary Australia and New Zealand. See you in the next video.